Good morning. We're going to do Rome and China today. We're going to talk about Rome and China in the context of understanding historical argument. We're interested in the way historians construct arguments about historical change, and comparing two large empires is a fun and interesting way to do that. We're going to do that in order to supplement some of your readings, particularly SAM Adshed in the Riley text discusses this. We want to look at the types of argument he offers. I'm going to give you some times and places of historical importance, the kinds of things that you as educated people should know. I'm also going to introduce you to kind of a trans-historical imperial process to suggest the ways in which all imperial processes are similar across time. And then finally, suggest some ways in which this is relevant today. But our real focus is on Rome and China, and I'm going to start here with Rome. Rome, of course, the Roman Empire begins in Rome, and in Italy, this is an area that is occupied by people going back to about 1000 BCE, we suppose. Around 600 BC, the seven hills of Rome merge, so there are populations on each of these hilltops, and they form a city that becomes Rome about 600 BCE. The Roman Republic is something we think about in the context of Western civilization. We think of Greek democracy, followed by the Roman Republic. In a lot of ways, republic is kind of a funny name for it. It's votes in a Senate, just like we have a Senate, but really the votes follow the wealthy and the well-connected. So if your father was a senator, you'll be a senator. Actually, come to think of it, it's not a whole lot different than it is today in America. But the way the people are engaged is not by voting for their senators, but in what was known as a patron-client relationship, whereby each senator or wealthy individual was a patron. They took care of a group of people further down the economic ladder known as clients, and much as in feudal times, they protected those people before the law, and those people supported them in politics. I like to think of the Roman Empire expanding in two stages. The first stage is really Italian expansion. This is the expansion of Rome to the point where the Romans are in charge of all of what we think of today as Italy, what we know of today as Italy. This is something that happens over the course of 150 years, from 500 to 350 BCE. And here the conflict is between pastoralists, people that farm goats and things, up in the hills, and arborists or farmers who grow crops down in the valleys. This is the conflict that you see in any good Western movie, where ranchers or farmers want their land for their kind of farming, and farmers that grow crops want land for their kind of farming, and there's a conflict. And the Roman city begins to protect people, not just in Rome, but in surrounding communities from these hill people, if you will, who are attacking. Importantly, they extend citizenship. They extend certain rights and responsibilities to the people that they conquer or take over. And again, it's not conquest in the same way it will be later, but it's extending protection to these new areas. So that's the first stage. After about 350 BC, there is a period of conflict between Carthage, and I'll show you Carthage in a bit, and Rome for control of trade in the Western Mediterranean. And then subsequently, between 200 and 150 BC, the Greeks are battling the Romans for control of trade in the Eastern Mediterranean. The important point here is that this is a Mediterranean empire. This is an empire that extends control through the Mediterranean Sea. Jumping ahead very quickly, around 100 BCE, the Republic begins to unwind. So any sense of democracy or shared governance begins to disappear. And in part, it's because there is this system of rotating governorships where the governors are appointed for a year at a time to the new regions that the Roman Empire now controls. And they're just not very good at it. By the time they figure out how to run things, they are sent home. The other important point people like to talk about is the way in which farmers are sent off to war. These are citizen farmers that go off to fight against Rome's enemies, the Carthaginians and the Greeks. And while they're away, their land is, I don't want to say swindled, but taken by the wealthy. And the wealthy, instead of growing grain for bread, begin to grow luxury crops, meat and wine. And as a result, there is eventually a series of food riots. People in Rome are getting hungry. Also, they're prisoners of war as they take over these new places. They've not extended citizenship now as they did on the Italian mainland. They've turned these into conquered people, and they've taken prisoners. And those prisoners of war are now workers. And so wage earners in Rome are faced with competition from prisoners of war. The result is wages decline. Finally, historians point to the fact that defending the empire is expensive, and this is the classic story we like to think of. You just simply overextend, and this is the argument today about the American empire, that the Americans are overextended by fighting too many wars in too many different places at the same time. Evaluating the Roman Empire. So there's a couple of things that are interesting. One is that after about 100 BC, we do have emperors emerging. And the emperors move from a system where instead of senators being in charge, they kind of go one level down the economic ladder and find these people that become civil servants. So the Roman Empire becomes this amazing bureaucracy, controlled ultimately by an emperor. So in that sense, it's not democratic at all. But for a lot of people, this is actually a perfectly good thing. They're much happier this way. Things function better. As they say, the trains run on time. This period is known as the Pax Romana, or Roman peace period, because for 200 years, the Roman Empire is essentially very, very peaceful. People are relatively happy, contented. Again, we don't think of this as a democracy, and yet it works. People are content. People are living their lives. There is also a period of Romanization that happens throughout the Roman Empire. We talked about the Hellenistic period of Greek history, where outside of Greece, people start to act like Greeks. By the same token, in the urban centers, the cities across this empire, this vast empire, people are building Roman-style buildings, dressing like Romans, speaking Latin, speaking the Roman tongue, and so forth. The other things that the Romans are known for are their technologies, in particular roads. You can still find Roman roads today throughout the Roman Empire, or what was the Roman Empire, and these roads really weave together the empire. We'll talk about Christianity later, but the fact is that were it not for the Pax Romana, were it not for the technology of the roads and the ability to move around the Roman Empire as a Roman citizen, Christianity would not have spread so easily. Nevertheless, there are certainly people that are not happy with the Roman Empire. Ooh, I'm missing an I. Not happy with the Roman Empire. There are revolts, in particular the Jewish revolt in Palestine or in Israel that runs from about 66 to 70 AD, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that in just a second. By the 200s, we get something known as the Third Century Crisis, and the Third Century Crisis essentially, you should know, is a period in which the center cannot hold, when the Romans are no longer able to maintain control of their empire. Okay, so quickly looking at a map, I want to show you now just the Eastern Roman Empire here. This is not the greatest extent of Rome. You're welcome to go look at various maps, but Rome eventually divides when Emperor Constantine moves the capital from Rome, which is over here, to Constantinople, which we've heard a lot about. Byzantium, the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire is known as. Constantine moves the capital to Constantinople in order to try to maintain control over this region more easily, which he does. And the Eastern Roman Empire continues for quite a long time. You know where the Greeks are. Again, there was a battle between the Greeks and the Romans for control over this part of the Mediterranean Sea. And Carthage, which is originally a Greek colony, is here. And as you can see, it's this little peninsula in North Africa, also extending out into the Mediterranean. And the Romans battled the Carthaginians for control over that part of the Western Mediterranean. I mentioned the Roman architecture. This is the Roman Forum, the center of Rome in classical Rome, or in the great period of the Roman Empire. And I encourage you to have a look here. And if you click on this, you can go to, as I showed you, a movie, a sort of virtual reality of the Forum. You can wander around it. The other thing I wanted to suggest to you is that we're now starting to see the history of the world begin to intersect. And I want to touch on, again, that Jewish revolt, 66 to 70 AD, where in 70 AD, the Romans retake Jerusalem from these Jewish rebels. And I wanted to show you that this is history beginning to intersect. So here on the lower right, you see Obama at something known as the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall. If you look closely, you'll see these little bits of white here. These are little prayers and messages to God that people have put in, asking God for this or that favor, or thanking God for this or that. And there is Obama, very amusingly, wearing a yarmulke and who knows what, but praying of some sort of prayer at this wall. This is the wall of the Jewish temple in Jerusalem that was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. The Jews commemorate this. They celebrate it, but not in a happy way. It's a holiday known as Tisha B'Av, and it is a sad holiday, mourning the loss of the temple. On the other hand, the Romans celebrated this, and here we see the Roman Arch of Titus. And the Arch of Titus is a big arch in Rome. Here it is, and that frieze was from it. I think it's from right up about here, celebrating the destruction of that temple. So here's a bunch of Jews and tourists at this old wall that is the last wall of the original temple. Here they are mourning and praying to God and so forth in this original holy site. And here back in Rome, we see this arch that was built to commemorate, sometime shortly after 70 AD, to commemorate this great victory of the Romans over these rebel Jews. So again, I just wanted to suggest the ways in which this this history begins to intertwine or become tangled together, and to tell you, hey, you know what? You really should go to Rome. You really should go to Palestine or Israel, to Jerusalem, and have a look around. It's worth doing. Okay, that's Rome. Now let's compare it to China. What I'm going to do is show you a little bit of some maps here. Again, some things that you ought to know, and then touch on the ways in which the Roman story and the Chinese story are different. Okay. First of all, we're talking about the Han Empire, of course. Now, the Han, it's interesting, are an ethnic group even today. Most Chinese are Han, but not all of the Chinese in China are Han. Not all of the Chinese that live in Taiwan are Han, and Hong Kong are Han, but virtually all of them are. So the Han are the largest ethnic group. And in fact, if we look at what's going on in Tibet today, in Western China, the big concern is that there are more and more Han Chinese moving into the area, overwhelming the ethnic Tibetans. Okay, so the Han are not just it's not just an empire, it's not just a dynasty, but an ethnic group. It begins in eastern China, what is today Eastern China, and I'll show you a map of China in a few minutes here, around the Yellow River, and their civilization, their empire begins to extend out along these river valleys, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The other thing to point out is the Great Wall of China. This is to keep the Han Empire protected from the people to the north, the Mongolians, these great horsemen, these great nomadic people who are trading with the Han, but also attacking the Han. I want to suggest the ways in which this is connected. So here's the Han Chinese Empire. There is something known as the Silk Road in this period that connects, and it's really this is the backbone of it here, connects the Roman Empire over here. Here's the edge of the Mediterranean with the Han Chinese Empire. And there are caravans, people walking with camels and carts across this massive, long path known as the Silk Road. You wouldn't have gotten on a camel here and ended up over here, but you would have gone from place to place and traded here, and then people from here would have traded here, and so forth and so on. One of the most fascinating places is this city known as Samarkand. It's a place I'd love to go. What's fascinating about these Silk Road towns is the mix of people. We think of the Chinese as one kind of people, and the Europeans or the Romans as another kind of people. And what you see as you go across this stretch of Central Asia is the way in which these people are mixed, and it's just gorgeous. You know, you look at these people, I look at these women here, and I think, are they Hispanic? Are they Turkish? Are they Chinese? Same with this boy here, I don't know. And then here's a woman from Samarkand, and, you know, she's as white could be. And again, what's fascinating to me, one of the reasons I'd love to go visit this region, I never have, is to see the people there and to see the ways in which our kind of standard ethnic categories, or the categories we think of, begin to get confused, very confused. Okay, here's just another map to show you a little more schematically this thing known as the Silk Road, various offshoots, land routes down into India and Persia, and then also to point out that there are ocean connections as well, down into East Africa, all the way across to the South China Sea. And this is the trading that's going on. So this is the ways in which these empires are, at least in some sense, connected. The Chinese, of course, famous for silk, and they're trading silk out across this Silk Road. I also want you to be familiar with the modern map. Here is mainland China as it exists today. Again, the Han Chinese start here. Here's Beijing. The Han Empire is a little further south, but this is all traditionally Han Chinese. And as we go out this way into areas like Tajikistan, Kazakhstan up here, Kyrgyzstan, we get into Central Asian peoples. And here's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran or Persia, and out to the Mediterranean a little further, right off my map there. Okay, so be aware. Here's Beijing, the capital of modern China. Be aware of where China is relative to Mongolia, India, and Persia in particular. Okay. So in explaining the differences and trying to understand the difference between the Chinese Empire and the Roman Empire, again, you have some good readings, and they do that, but to lay out in very simplistic detail what they're arguing about. One of the arguments Atshid and others make is that the difference between these two empires is essentially an environmental argument. You might say environmental determinism, that because of the kind of farming the Chinese are doing, they're not involved in animal husbandry, they don't have animals, and that's partly because they don't need to lay fields fallow, in other words, to let fields not be farmed year to year. They have much higher calories being produced per acre strictly by vegetables. So their mobility is different, their lifestyle is different, and they tend to expand out into ecological areas that are amenable to their kind of farming. Okay, whereas in Rome you have animal husbandry together with growing of crops. The other argument that's made is about technology. The Chinese have a better harness for their horses, and they're able to plow better. Ooh, pardon me. The other thing is the crossbow. People point to that the Chinese have this better metallurgy. They're better able to work metal, and they're able to create a trigger mechanism for their bow and arrows, so that they essentially make what is a cross between a rifle and a bow. It's a much more powerful weapon than just a hand bow. Instead of just doing this, you can crank back this bowstring and have a trigger mechanism and aim and pull it. They simply have better metallurgy. They're better able to make trigger mechanisms that actually work, the argument goes. Another argument is that the Chinese, unlike the Romans, which have gods much like the Greeks did, are Confucian in their outlook. And you're going to read some of Confucius' Analects, which talk about how to lead and the roles play the role of the emperor and leading through ritual as opposed to leading by punishment or force. So there's an argument that it's a cultural difference. Okay, all of these clearly it's not one of these individual things that's a single explanation. It's a complex set of explanations, but I'd argue that a lot of these bear more digging. So, for example, you say, well, the Chinese had different technology. Well, okay, they had different technology, but why did they have different technology? How was their culture different that they pursued a different technology? They weren't just smarter than the Romans. Different things were going on that made them pursue a technology. But again, it's important to understand not the absolute answers here, but the kinds of questions that are being asked. Okay, the last point I'll make here is to do with this last line here on this slide. The process of empire is the same. And I'd say that the process of empire is really always the same. We can talk about technology, we can talk about military power, but at the end of the day, lasting empires, Rome lasting for hundreds of years, China lasting for hundreds of years, arguably into today, is a function of millions of people making a decision to join up or not join up with the empire. At the end of the day, it's not because you favor democracy and you fight against the Romans. It's because life under the Romans is not as good, you suppose, as life not under the Romans. By virtue of joining the empire, you get all kinds of benefits: better food, better clothing, better stability in your life, better trade, better economic conditions, and so forth, better health, perhaps. So it's these little decisions that make empires either sustainable or unsustainable, I'd say. And I think we can see this today looking at, for example, Afghanistan. Now, we can look at this at two levels. First of all, the U.S. is obviously involved in a kind of empire building in Afghanistan. It's not that we're going to turn it into an American colony or an American state, but we'd like it to be under American influence. We'd like them to join our side instead of the other side. How are we successful at doing that? Well, at one level, we're shooting people and bombing people, and people are shooting back and bombing back. But really, it comes down to, I would say, people living outside the wire, beyond the big military bases, trying to get the population to buy into the American plan, buy into what the future as we envision it for them, as opposed to the future as envisioned for them by people coming over from Pakistan, funded through the Gulf states, funded by the Persians in Iran, that there are different empires there are different players trying to establish some form of empire, some form of control over the country of Afghanistan. At a more local level, I would say you can see the process of empire kind of writ large or writ small on the country. If you go to Kabul, you have there a central government. Just like in Rome, you had a central government commanding all of the Roman Empire. But in reality, Kabul doesn't control much of Afghanistan beyond Kabul. Sometimes people say that Hamid Karzai is not the president of Afghanistan, he's the mayor of Kabul. And the point being that he doesn't have control in the outlying areas. Instead, there's local control. There are local warlords or local people, men who command the allegiance, command the military might, and the resources of particular areas. Okay? And it's that process of either trying to have some form of central control and agreement, or lots of little fiefdoms, lots of little areas with small bits of control. That process, trying to keep that center together, trying to keep that land together, controlled by a single center, that is the process of empire. And again, that's a process that's sure at some level at the edges about military power or technological power, but it's also ultimately about the decisions individuals make to live or die with or without the empire. Alrighty, there you go. It's a topic ripe for discussion, and I hope we can talk about it when I see you again. Bye bye.